Awesome. Well, let's walk. Let's do it. Well, first of
Let's
all, thank
walk
you
and
so
let's talk.
much for doing this today. How have you been?
I've been great. I've been pretty busy lately, but just now getting back to creating cool art and, just chilling, I guess.
I love it. And yeah, I really appreciate as you kind of laid out the different phases of your work. And I mean, I think that made creating this gallery pretty interesting, where we've got all the different phases kind of through your journey over the last couple of years, at least in the digital art space. And we can definitely dive a little bit more into each one of those, and definitely curious on how your process has evolved, as well as kind of the storytelling throughout a few of the different lines of work that you're doing. So if we want to go ahead and start in the front area of the room next to phase one, so this is the early, mid-journey, and stable diffusion. So let's start with Atlas 2. So for some of the first Atlas pieces, I remember when this series came out. I'm trying to remember who flagged me to this work, but between the colors, between just the different characters and the different elements, I just found it to be very intriguing and fascinating, and just really was a type of storytelling that I was really interested in, especially in the AI world. So let's just start with Atlas. Where did this idea come from?
Okay, so Atlas is my very first experiment with AI. And I remember back in May of 2022, I have a friend who's also a crypto artist, but now he takes care of the community management for MProps. His name is Quitters. And he had sent me a link for the very, I'm not sure if it was like a beta stage or something for Midjourney. And I just, completely fell in love with the idea of creating art through prompting. So Atlas actually is the fruit of these very first experimentations that I had with Midjourney. And I liked them so much that I decided to create a project around this, around creating art through AI, which was something that at the time was just starting out. We had people like Zero Nine and Anna Dart and Clown Vamp and a couple of other people that were starting to explore this as well. And that was back in June of 22. And I really didn't know how to approach like the the market aspects of things. So I just decided to mint pieces and ask people to place their own offers for them for however much they thought they were worth. I know this isn't very conventional or anything, but it's all, at least how I interpreted it was part of the experimental side of things, I guess. And Atlas is actually, I bet most people that started in AI, we didn't really have that much of a concept of where this tool could take us. So it was all experimentation back then. So what I did, at least, I got these figures and artists and styles that I really liked, and I mashed them all together in a prompt. And Atlas is what came out of that. So Atlas, it's I think for people who know who Moebius is, Jean Giraud, the I think he's French or he might be Belgian, but so Jean Giraud, he was a comic book artist from the 70s, I believe, and he has this really unique style that I'm very, very big fan of. So I wanted to emulate that in my art, but I also wanted to mix some different styles with that as well. So with Moebius, I also introduced Akira Toriyama, the Japanese artist behind Dragon Ball Z, which I'm also a big fan of. And I started creating these pieces that, to me, they all looked like snapshots of a very, very distant world, somewhere really far away where laws of physics wouldn't apply, and there were these weird structures, kind of organic but kind of mineral like, and I just really liked them. So I started building this collection around that. And Atlas Zero Two, I chose to display this one, I guess, because I don't know, I like the balance between the colors and what's floating and also this grounded scene. I like it very much. So out of all the 50 pieces in Atlas, there are a couple of favorites, but this one really is I think the defining piece of the whole collection. There's also the the fact that the very first Atlas piece, so Atlas 001, I actually minted, and this happens all the time with artists. Like we have so many files on our computers that we sometimes mix things up. And Atlas 001 is actually in a very low resolution. It was, I think, 1024 by 1024 pixels. And so, yeah, that's the only one that's in the low resolution. And starting from Atlas 2, I started using these upscalers, and pictures were very much more defined. And yeah, I think Atlas is it's an interesting collection. It was very experimental, and I think it defined this this idea that I have of just trying new things out, I guess.
I love that. No, that's such an interesting backstory. And I think, because this piece, was this minted on object or was this on the hen contract?
This was on Object.
Okay.
So back
Yeah, I
in
feel like this was
back
still
yeah, go ahead.
pretty early object where 'cause this was probably like one of the first collections on object that I really found. And I think it was still just such a playground for experimentation. And I think just knowing that Atlas 1, the resolution, like wasn't quite there, I feel like everybody was just like trying to figure out what was going on. And think that just kind of adds to the overall story of like the Atlas journey. And what I
Oh,
really enjoy about this piece is like at the bottom, like you zoom in and you see this seems like some type of like sprawling city, but then you look up and like that huge monolith is like 100 times bigger. So it's like, is that a floating city? Is that a spaceship? Like there's a lot of questions to be had. But yeah, just the form, the texture, the color. Like this is just such a really cool piece. And it's like I look at this and it's like this is a world that I just want to learn more about. There's just a lot of questions there.
yeah, and Atlas, like while I was working on Atlas, it felt really shallow to just make interesting looking pictures. So I started, you know, sketching up a story behind everything, which is the post that we pinned up on the Twitter Spaces. And so the idea of Atlas is like this really, I don't want to keep using the word weird, but I think weird is the right word for this. That it's this world where this girl found, or actually her parents found, both of her dads, they found. So Earth in the very distant future. This girl, she had two parents who were explorers, and they found this planet that they wrote about, and they talked about it in detail, and they said it was so fantastic and had these structures that seemed that like they were placed there by someone, but at the same time they looked very organic and like they've been there for a very long time. And suddenly her parents disappeared. So as she grew and she started studying what they left behind, she decided to go there. So what I try to communicate with these pieces is like snapshots of what this girl saw when she was looking at this world for the first time. And yeah, so there's a little story behind it, but Atlas is for me, what it means to me at least is breaking the ice from just creating to experimenting and putting that out there in the world and seeing how other people respond to things that you make. And that was it wasn't my very first contact with minting NFTs. I was present in Web3 before Stotkal, but it was a whole different vibe. I've worked I've I minted some pieces on the Hen contract in 2021 in May and June of 2021. I also created a couple of other collections, but Atlas was really like a project. It was something that I expected to keep producing and experimenting with. And well, that's where it's taken me right now. It all started with Atlas. So that's something I'm really grateful for. And the initial response is really cool. I made friends with people who I was very fortunate to meet and chat with and receive a whole bunch of good insight. And, creativity is something that should be shared. And I feel like Atlas was my gateway to this art world, and seeing, the growth of acceptance of AI art and all that stuff, just it's really symbolic for me. And I think my contribution to this early stages of AI is Atlas. And yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. I mean, we could feel like talk about this piece in the Atlas series the entire hour. We can move on, but we'll have to
Absolutely.
put a pin in this because I see just like you creating like a picture book or like actually turning this into like a full story. Because like as you're describing those elements, I'm like I want to learn more. Like what else? Like what did she find? Like what were her parents looking for? It's like I've got a lot of questions, and I think you definitely have something here. So we can put a pin in this and save it for another time. But I did want to touch on the gift of Atlas 009 called the Dream Bridge. So this is a gift that you gave to me probably 2 years ago at this point, and I remember it very vividly. I was so excited that you reached out and you're like, choose from one of these. And that was an impossible task. So I'm like, which one is your favorite? And you selected this one. And the name Dream Bridge didn't come to me for some time, but for whatever reason, I'd be scrolling through, I'd go back, and it would just stop me in my tracks, and I just look at it as almost the gateway between like when you fall asleep and when you get into that dream state, and like that's the bridge that you cross over. So I'm really curious, just from the creation standpoint, kind of what brought you to being like, yep, this is the output.
Uh, so this bridge, I don't know why. It's very symbolic to me as well. Like when you asked me which one I like the most, and coincidentally, this one was the one that I liked the most, right? And it's not because of the aesthetic. I really like the aesthetic, but more so because of the meaning. Because for me, so I feel like there's a bridge between reality and dreams that we can reach through art, and it's just a very fascinating and intricate concept that many artists have explored throughout history, right? So this bridge specifically, it's to me it serves as a conduit for, the expression of both what's tangible and what's intangible, what's conscious and what's subconscious, right? So, all throughout the history of art, we had surrealism and even realism. Like we try to depict things that are real through something that is immaterial, something like art, something that you don't express through physicality, but more through emotions and stuff. And I feel like there's something between what we create and what we dream. There, and that something might be this bridge that I'm trying to depict, right? So I don't know. It's creating art for me. I find it hard to accept that initially, at least, that well, it might seem a little ironic, but that AI art is art. I always felt kind of ashamed of calling myself an artist, but once I learned to accept that this medium that we're using, it's nothing more than another one of those bridges that emancipates art through, like, that uses art as a medium through our subconscious and materializes it in the physical world and in reality. And I feel like this is a pretty good depiction of that feeling. So this is a defining moment for me. Like right after I finished creating Atlas and I started sending these away, like this is where I noticed that people really appreciated what I was doing and how I was expressing myself to the world. And yeah, it's a very symbolic bridge, and I really like the name you gave it because I don't know, it's and this is actually like the first piece I think where blue is the main the main pillar of feeling and thought, right? Like blue is just something so serene and calming, and putting that and finding I like to think that I find these outputs. Like I'm so they some people say that anything and everything you can imagine, like the algorithms that AI can output, already has that in it. You just have to find the right combination of words to get it. So when I found this piece, I was very, very much moved by it. And I think this analogy of it being a dream bridge between the conscious and the subconscious, and it being like a path where my art or my journey leads me. It's something very poetic, and I like it very much.
I love that. Yeah, I mean I completely agree around your sentiment with AI. I mean, AI is nothing more than a tool that can be used to express yourself. And I think that AI is similar to sculpture work. It's like you're searching for something that's already there. Like when somebody creates a sculpture out of marble, like the masterpiece is in there. They just need to discover it. And I think very similarly to AI, it's almost like a reductive process. And then once you get
Absolutely.
to the output, you feel like, okay, this is it. Like, this is what I was looking for. So, yeah, I find it just fascinating to learn more about the process around AI. So, I really appreciate you diving a little bit more into it. So let's move on to the last piece in phase one here. So singularity two. So can already tell, seems like this is from a different world. Like this is a different universe that you created. So really curious to learn a little bit more about this concept.
So singularity, this is actually the very first time I ever used stable diffusion, which would later become the main tool for my creative process. And I remember when I was using it for the very first time, and how it made like actual faces and very clear figures and structures. I was just completely blown away by this technology. For me, it was like a true eureka moment of like, okay, we've definitely crossed like to a new threshold of what AI art is capable of, and that just fascinated me so much. And singularity, so the concept of singularity is, so in a hypothetical future where technological growth becomes completely uncontrollable and irreversible, right? Through, exponential growth and Turing's law and all that stuff. So I wanted to transmit that concept through my art. I wanted to blend like humans and machine, right? And all of like the whole Singularity collection is about that. Is like for me at least, this was the point where I basically melded with my medium, which is AI. And yeah, so these outputs, they're all about that. They're about that fine line between what's real and what's not real, what's art, what's not art, and the how the use of technology is breaking those boundaries and bringing these discussions into topic, right? So it's completely different from what I was doing. And for me, looking back, I think this is the moment where I thought I don't need to do like variations of the same style forever. I'm gonna permit myself to just explore what I'm feeling and see where my creative subconscious leads me to. And so this was a very divisive moment for me because all of my peers, or most of my peers, they've been following the same line of aesthetic and style and process ever since they started out. And when I created Singularity, which was my second major collection, I kind of let all of that go. I just said, I want to create things and I'm going to put these things out there for people to see. And I'm not going to be bound by, you know, I don't want to say preconceived notions because everybody's free to do what they want, but I just wanted to allow myself to explore and to see new things and test new things out. So I feel like that's one of my main characteristics, like just trying new things out. And I feel if you look at these two pieces side by side, you could argue that they're two completely different artists, but they're not. It's just the same person that's going through two different stages or two different states of mind. And yeah,
I love that. Yeah, and I think again, any artist is free to do whatever they so choose, but I really do appreciate and respect when an artist just follows their natural drift, and if it takes them in a completely different direction, like that's totally cool and okay. 'Cause, I mean, when you go to a museum and like you see an artist's work, if they have like an exhibition about like one artist, and you like see their progression until like they reach like their eureka moment, like there's a good chance they've done so many different styles. They've like copied artists at the beginning to like try to find their voice. They tried using color, they tried black and white. They're trying all these different tools just to kind of see where it goes. And then over time, their like true voice comes through. And you can see this through line through the tools. And I think just with AI being so new, like I think it's kind of hard to see the through line from Atlas to Singularity, but just like knowing in terms of the progression of what programs you're using, what tools you're using, I think with time it'll become much easier. I think we're just so early in the process that none of those kind of easy identifiable features, at least to me, are there. But I think with time it'll just become more normal, more status quo, just as AI art becomes just more a part of the canon of art history.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And so yeah, these two pieces they defined this first phase of mine where I was, finding my footing, experimenting, trying new things out. AI art at that time was something completely novel. I mean, we did have, Google, I think it was called Dream Mind or something, and we had Night Cafe. We had a couple of tools, but these two, Early Midjourney and Stable Diffusion 1.0, I think these were the tools that really pushed our medium and introduced so many artists to this fascinating world of AI art and all of its possibilities. So yeah, I mean they're different, but to me they're both part of the same, I guess. I mean, I don't want to be redundant, but of the same phase, of the same feeling and the
Totally.
same thing that I was going through at the time, you know?
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. And I think it's really helpful for all of us just to kind of understand how new AI art is. And I mean, nobody's an expert in AI art because I mean, it hasn't been around for that long. I guess like Harold Cohn's probably like one of the first ones. And I mean, even that, if you say that's one of the first, that's 40 years. And in the span of everything, 40 years is not very long. So it'll be interesting to look back on this and decades, 100 years down the line, and kind of see what people think. And hopefully, this oncyber gallery is here, and they can see the different phases, and it'll be interesting to get their thoughts. So hopefully, they're
Awesome.
listening to this right now on YouTube a few 100 years down the road. So hello to you. Hope everything's good out there. So let's move on to phase two, pinks and blues. So a couple of my favorite pieces that you selected. Really excited to chat through these. I mean, the 12th Dream is just so dreamy, and just the blues, the pinks. I mean, I think that color combo has always been one of my favorites. Like growing up as a kid, just like cotton candy colors. It's just kind of like a carefree, just feels like summer and so airy and dreamy. And again, with the dream concept kind of pulling through into phase two, I'm really curious on kind of what distinguishes kind of this area and like why pinks and blues, like why did this kind of become its own phase in your eyes?
So when I look back at phase two and what I was thinking back then, I felt like I was lagging behind some of my peers when I didn't really have like something that I was known for. I didn't have like a representative style, even though I tried to move away from that. I wanted something to anchor my art so that people could see something in these works and know that they were for me. And I chose color. And these colors that I chose, pink and blue, to me they represent a lot, but I think the most important aspect is harmony and balance between these two. So there's the warmth of pink and the coolness of blue. There's the softness of pink and the strength of blue, right? So I feel like not only is the combination really pleasing, there's this nostalgic feel to it, from the cotton candy and, childhood colors and that bubbly feeling of nostalgia. And I don't know, it's just most, I feel like this is something that's going to come up a lot in this conversation, but I'm very much inclined to just doing things not by choice, but by feeling. Not sure if that makes sense, but I try to create things through what I feel and not through what I choose. And at one point, I remember it very well. I think it was in like September-ish of 2022. I started experimenting with a whole bunch of color pairs, and pink and blue was the one that moved me the most. And just like my name, Stotkal was like a complete random mess of words derived from me deleting my old name on Twitter, my old bio on Twitter, and these this string of words just being left there, and me choosing that as my name. The blue and the pinks were one of the many colors that I tried, but ones that really spoke to me. So I adapted that to my style. I brought that in as the anchor that would bridge all of these collections in the future, to so that people could see them and know that it was me. Well, well, at least that's what I like to think. I'm sure some of these works or some of my collections, for someone who's never seen my stuff before, or if they're looking at it for the first time and they see it, they might not find that much of a defining characteristic between these different collections. But for me, the pinks and the blues, they're really like this point of convergence between all of my collections and all of my art.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I completely resonate with the thinking versus feeling. And I think with art, especially, just like going with your gut and following what just feels right, just to me makes a ton of sense. And there's just a lot of just kind of like the mystery of art. It's like we find certain things like your name. It's like you knew at that moment, it's like, yes, like this is it. Like it was just meant to be. And there's certain things with like you trying different colors. It's like certain things just click for whatever reason. And I think it's our job just to recognize when something like that happens, and then just being okay to say, yes, that's what I'm going to go with. And I don't necessarily need to have a reasoning for this. And I think that's a really interesting way to be true to yourself. And as an artist, I think that allows your authenticity to come through. And I think it'll allow
Absolutely.
that through line to really continue to permeate throughout just because you're staying true to yourself. And I think that's very, very, very important.
Absolutely. And so this collection, Blush Dreams, so I had these health problems back when I was in high school, which eventually led to psychological problems. So I started going to my how do you say it? Not psychiatrist, um, my shrink,
Like
I guess.
therapists,
Yeah,
there.
therapist. Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
No worries.
And she recommended that I start keeping a dream journal. So I've been keeping a dream journal for the better part of the last 10 years. I'm not like 100% faithful to it. Like I don't do it every single day, but it's a recurring thing that I've been trying to keep for all this time. So for me, talking about dreams is talking about something that's hidden deep inside of my mind and is trying to break through. And this collection specifically, at least what I see, is my childhood. So, as you guys probably know, I'm from Brazil, but I lived most of my life outside of Brazil. My dad worked with oil and gas, so we moved around a lot. I lived in more than 10 countries and went to more than 20 different schools all along my childhood, so it was pretty rough. So I didn't really have a place to call home for a long time. But then eventually I noticed that home isn't where you are, it's where you feel at home. So for me, this is the countryside of my hometown in southern Brazil, which is very rural, very, bucolic, pastoral kind of vibes, I guess. So with lush dreams, and it's actually funny that this was the very first point that I started using pink and blue, but yeah, it's a portrait of where I feel at home, like these serene, fluffy clouds and these meadows and like the trees in the distant in these fields and stuff. It might not be exactly like what I see in Brazil, but it's what reminds me of home. So the this collection holds a very, very deep meaning for me, and I was very grateful when people saw these, and their initial response was very good. They liked it very much. So yeah, I felt connected with not only my home, I guess, but with people that found comfort in these images. So yeah,
That's beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's, I mean, keeping a dream journal for 10 years. I mean, that's pretty fascinating, and I can only imagine what going back in that dream journal and reading some of those entries, what that would feel like. I feel like that could, yeah, there's so much to, I'm sure, to unpack there, but that's really interesting, and appreciate kind of learning a little bit more about your backstory and how it connects to your artwork. As we move on to another pink and blue project, the Laissez Faire number 43 that we have selected here. This is part of an FX Hash project, which this was the first time I knew you did an FX Hash project. I was not aware of this at all. So I'm curious to learn more. Have you always known, or have you always known how to code? Because I know you use p5.js for this project. So not only is this fascinating, but I think it's quite interesting that you use both AI and p5.js to create this.
yeah. I've always loved generative art, and for me, AI art and generative art have a lot of similarities. And back when this piece was created, there weren't any. Well, I think there were a couple, but the concept was different, and there were mostly images that people generated with AI and just created a program on P5 that just spat out the actual image. So I wanted to create something that actually blended these two concepts together. So I do have a little experience with coding. Back then, I wasn't that good at coding, but I started experimenting with P5 mainly because of trying to, well, just because of the experimentation, I guess. That's something very recurring in my creative process, like trying new tools and experimentation and all that. So I started, you know, the ideation process for this, and I didn't really know how to blend these two things together, at least in a meaningful way. So for this piece or this project, um, I thought of the concept first. And back then, I was reading Brave New World for like the fourth time. And it's a book that to me has plenty of meaning and importance in my life, I guess. But I started trying to, you know, see if there are any meaningful relations between AI art, and the story of Brave New World. And as I started writing these things down, I saw that there's a lot of points of confluence between these two things, right? So Brave New World is all about, a very dystopic future where creativity is really mechanized, like the world state, like the main antagonist of the story, like this dystopic government that controls the world. They're really against creativity because creativity is a channel for you to you know start inciting revolutions, I guess. I feel like that's the right word. But Brave New World, um so the art and creativity, they're controlled and manufactured to maintain the stability of the society. So it's not art for the art, it's art for control. And AI art involves algorithms and data, and they usually mimic human creativity, or basically that's what it does. So these relationships between mechanized creativity and human creativity is something that is a theme that I wanted to explore in this, right? So there are a couple of ethical and philosophical questions that we can explore, but the main thing that I wanted to bridge between Brave New World, which is my favorite book, and art is the idea that, at least for now, we're free to do what we choose in any way, shape, or form that we choose to do it in. And yeah, so this piece, I created a small program that takes the chapters of the book. I believe there's 16 or 17 chapters in Brave New World, and some images that I had previously created with Stable Diffusion, and it creates an ASC. I don't know how to say. I never know how to say ASCII. How do you say it? ASCII, ASCII,
My
ASCII,
understanding is ASCII.
ASCII. Okay, so it creates an ASCII image, but it doesn't use random letters, right? So it actually uses the string of words of each chapter of Brave New World. So each of these generative tokens, they chose one specific chapter, and it created the ASCII image with the letters of the of what's written in those chapters. You can't really see it here, but if you go on FX Hash, you can see it more clearly. Like the each letter was assigned a pixel color value of the original pixel behind the letter, and the letter assumed the color of the pixel. So all of these letters together, they'd make the image. And then I added some more parameters, like the weight of each character, so they could be more full and the image would look more complete, or they could be more light, I guess. They could be lighter and the image would be more damn, it'd be more loose, I guess. You could see like the space behind the image. And yeah, I mean, it's for me, it's all about experimenting. And actually, like the guys over at FX Hash, I don't remember the names, but they actually reached out to me and they were very interested in this project because they said I was the first person to try to make something like this on FX Hash. So I was really excited about that. But after I made this piece, I never looked back into FX Hash to creating something new. That's something I have on my bucket list for the future. But yeah, it was a really fun process, fun experiment, and I was really satisfied with the result. I feel like it was very expressive. My friends all loved their outputs, so it was a really nice job. I liked it very much.
Yeah, I mean that's so cool. When I was looking through the project and zooming in, like at first I thought they were just random letters, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool to make it all work. But then I'm like, wait, like I noticed words in a row, and I'm like, this has got to be the text of the book. Because I read the description, I'm like, okay, so it's like about it, but it's like no, it's like made up of it, and I just found that incredibly cool. And like I told you before, my sister recently read this book and loved it. And again, just serendipitous. I'm like, she had a birthday, and I'm like, we should do something together to make a gift for her. So I am very excited to work on that with you, and I know she's going to be very excited to receive it. And I know it's been on my list of books to read for some time, and from this project and from just hearing more about it, I know it. I need to read this soon, so we can definitely chat about it once I finish because it seems like it's a
Absolutely.
fascinating novel if you've read it 4 times.
Yeah, and actually, if you open one of these on FX Hash, and I think if you press the T key on your keyboard, you'll actually save the text, the the chapter of the book that the image is derived from, which was a pretty cool feature that I
That's amazing.
implemented.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just love how you totally used FX hash for something novel and interesting and made total sense with the concept of the piece. And I just think that's the beauty of FX hash. Like it gives you a sandbox to be as creative as possible. And I mean, it seems like a lot of people just kind of go with like the standard long form process. But I just love how you took this in a completely different direction. And I mean, it's amazing that FX Hash told you that you were like the first person to do it. Because I mean, this project was, there's probably tens of thousands of projects before you, and you were the first to do something. So you should be pretty proud about that.
thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Amazing. Well, let's continue to move on here. I wanted to get to Rotalum 00. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly. And when I was putting this on the wall, I noticed that this has got to be where your PFP comes from. Is that correct?
It is. It is. Yeah.
Amazing. That's what I thought. Good. I'm glad I was able to discern that. Since it's your PFP, I can only imagine the importance behind it. I love the description that you have written there, and just from learning more about how dreams is so important to who you are, I'm really curious to learn a little bit more about this piece and also love the animation around it. And I know you use a little bit more animation as we kind of continue our journey here on the other side of the wall, but would love to learn a little bit more about this work.
Yeah, so Rotalum is actually emulator in reverse. And this collection is all about me, the artist, trying to simulate a computer that simulates artists. So it's kind of breaking of the fourth wall. Instead of a computer simulating an artist as AI art does, I wanted to simulate like the rendering of an image as it's rendered through AI, right? So it's kind of a deconstruction of how AI images are made. And I don't, so dreams are at the center of my work. It's what I base most of my concepts around, and where I try to find meaning in what I do. And eventually the things I create start leaking into my dreams. So it becomes this retroactive process of my dreams become my art and my art become my dreams. So I wanted to transmit this in a collection, and that's where Rotalum comes from, and that's why I chose to use this as my PFP, because for me this was a defining concept, and when I realized this, I wanted to, keep that as my persona, as my center stage image to the world, I guess. And yeah, that's where this comes from. And this text, and with this collection, I think it started a bit before. There are a couple of collections that didn't make it into the gallery, but I started not only using the NFT, the concept of NFTs to mint images, but also to express ideas. So for me, the NFT isn't only the image or the video or the media that you're putting out, but also the other metadata that's attributed to it. So like the name, the description, the attributes, that for me is all part of the work of art. So I started writing a bit, and this is just another one of those pieces where I started expressing myself through writing alongside these pieces. And yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah, I love that. And I totally understand that sentiment. And I mean, the beauty about public mutable blockchains is you put it out into the world, and for however long our blockchains will be up and running, like it's going to be there. And there's something just very beautiful and special about it, especially within the art world. Like I just look at art as humans as like our diary of being living on this planet. It's like for as long as people have been around, there's been like cave drawings, there's ways that humans have expressed themselves. And again, that's not going to stop. But now with the internet and with blockchain, it just is almost that next step where it's like as long as computers are still around, like this will still be available for all to see at all times. Whereas like a cave drawing, like unless you're in that cave with a light on it, that's the only way to see it. But like anybody can see the original of this anywhere at any place just with an internet connection. And I mean that's amazing. And like that's why I just find digital art so amazing. And with this new canvas that we have, like there's just so much potential. So thank you for sharing this, and has the blues and pinks. So it's definitely the PFP that you chose, and like the one frame that you chose, I thought is also perfect just to represent you as an artist. And as I'm learning more about the blues and pinks, it just makes so much more sense.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, let's flip on the other side of this wall here. So we're now beginning our phase three, the mysterious cloaked figures. So I know we've got about 15 minutes left, so I feel like we'll need to go a little bit quicker on this side.
Perfect.
But I
Yeah.
did want to start with SAD 3. I thought this was a really fascinating piece. And as you're walking across the room, like you can kind of see that like moire effect that you have on it, which I
Yeah.
find very interesting. It's kind of just like looking at like an old school TV set, but with the text that you put next to it, obviously it's very deep, very poetic. Like, is this a self portrait? I'd love to learn a little bit more about this one.
Yeah. So for me, making art and trying to express yourself as an artist is all about the highs and the lows. So self-acceptance is a big theme of what moves me to keep creating. So sales has never been my forte, I guess. And I've been very criticized in the past about how I sell my work. Like I always try to make things accessible. Like I think about my peers here in Brazil that don't have hundreds of dollars to shell out on digital art pieces. So people, like not too many people, I guess, but a couple of people have criticized the way I approach marketing my art and selling my art, and I don't know. I feel like it is a portrait of me. This is why I do art. It's to feel unbound, to feel free, to explore. And I'm just grateful that people appreciate it and see me for who I am and understand that this is all part of my journey and this is what I do. I do art not to make money or anything. I mean, I have my own career outside of Web3, but I do it as therapy, as a way for self-expression or, to just be a part of this incredible community. So yeah, yeah, this poetry that I try to write in some of my works, they're very raw. They're usually what I'm thinking at a specific moment, and it's just a snapshot of where I am or where I was. And Stotkal art delivery, which is the what sad means, was when like as a counteroffensive, I guess, against people that were criticizing the way that I try to that I position myself in this Web3 world. I wanted to give people free art. So I just created this a couple of pieces and started sending them to people. And so that's why it's called art delivery. But also the name SAD means sad, which is also related to how I was feeling at that moment. I wasn't that happy with what I was doing or with what a couple of people were thinking of me. So like, at the same time, it's it's like a response to that, I guess.
Whenever, thank you for sharing that. I love the acronym that you have, and just you just kind of putting your middle finger up to those people. It's like I don't understand why people would unsolicitedly just tell an artist this is what you should be doing. Like everybody's on their own path. And like we were saying
Exactly.
before, like you're going to do what feels right and you're going to listen to yourself. And I think, at least that's my perspective. Like, I'm sure if you wanted to X's and O's and like, oh, you don't want to, like, if the goal is to make art, put it out into the world and see if people resonate with it and just enjoy creating it just because that's what you do. It's like, it just comes out of you. It's not like oh, I'm going to create art today. It's like, this is just who I am, and it's just going to happen. And just when
Exactly.
people tell artists that you should be doing this, you should be doing that, I mean, that's never something that I would do. I just don't think unsolicited feedback is super helpful. But I love your response to it and pretty much going completely the other way and be like, oh, you want me to increase my prices? How about I'm just gonna send it out to people for free? So I think that's amazing and just like also kind of goes with the crypto ethos of like I'm gonna do what I want and there's really nothing that you can do to stop me. So I think
Yeah,
that's amazing and that's so cool.
thanks.
Amazing. So let's go on to between dilution here. So we'll have to go a little bit quick with the
Yeah.
next few here, but I want to make
I
sure
think
that we
I
hit
think we can
on
talk
each one of
about
them.
these. Yeah, yeah. I think we can talk about these together because they're
Okay.
part of like a same style that I was exploring at the time, and it has a very subtle pixel distortion to it. So if you look closely, you can see like this soft trailing lines, and I was experimenting with textures and all of that. And at this point, I started including no, I didn't start including, I actually started forcing my prompts a bit more. So in Stable Diffusion, you can put parentheses in a certain part of your prompt and adding weights to it, right? So I was focusing on these mysterious cloaked figures, and I don't know why with AI art, like there's some words, like there's some combinations of words that just completely change your outputs. And for me, one of those words or a string of words were mysterious cloaked figures, and I really loved how the subjects in these pieces were expressed in the outputs. So I called this phase three the mysterious cloaked figures because that's when I identified that using this specific string of words, I'd reach this specific output of style. And I enjoyed it very much. So I made a couple of collections derived specifically from forcing the prompt into a certain direction. And with that, I got a couple of collections out of those. So Between Dilution is from, I think, Replication Grove is the name of the collection. Soft Reflections is, damn, I can't remember the name of the collection on Exchange. And Race Day or Day of the Race, they're all part of the same universe, I guess. They're basically different people, but they all represent the same subject and this concept of mystery and these poses that are not really dynamic, but they kind of are at the same time, as if like they're frozen in time, like as they are. Is something that I was exploring at that moment. So yeah,
I love that. Yeah, I mean, each one of these I think are just very unique by themselves, but again, with knowing the process behind it and just that through line that you were describing, it puts them together. I think my favorite of those three is of soft reflections. This is the first of me seeing this work from you, and I just love how still everything around that person is, and then you just see the clouds moving, and just you just without oncyber, like if you're looking at this on your phone, you're looking at a still, you're like, here, look at this piece of art. It's like it loses so much. But looking at it here where it's just scrolling across the screen, like I can see having a digital display in your house and you just have this going and going and going. And I just
hmm,
find it to be a such a beautiful piece.
yeah, yeah, and I feel like, as you said, digital display is how I'd like these pieces to be seen, and I feel like in the future these displays will be as commonplace as paper. I feel like the paper for our upcoming generations are going to be screens. So, yeah, I like how there's this dichotomy between the still and the moving, and how just a different medium of where you see the art, how it changes so much, right? And this piece specifically, it's completely still except for the reflection that it's showing. So it's kind of a conversation between that on its own as well. But yeah, I really like this piece a lot. I feel like it's very serene, I guess.
No, I completely agree. I'm a huge fan of it. Awesome. Well, we've got 4 minutes left. Phase four, experimental. So we've got
Yeah,
two pieces within this phase here that we chose. We've got Myriad number 13, and then we've got the Atlas Mastered series. So let's start with Myriad just because this is, again, a new exploration for you. So for this one, you used Emergent Properties, which is an incredible long form AI platform. And again, it seems like you've created a new world, but we have some of those cloaked figures. Like we have a lot of the elements from previous phases, but you're adapting it totally new. So I'm curious on kind of the way that you're looking at this and how you came to having another long form drop instead of on FX hash, but on M props this time.
yeah. So when FX Hash released for the public back in March of this year, I've always been a huge fan of Mprops, and I really liked what creators were building with it. So I always wanted to try it, but I never got the opportunity to try it back when it was in its beta stage. So I was already experimenting to see how I'd approach this collection once it became available to the public. And actually, Myriad is basically the same prompt that I've been using, or, you know, the same prompt structure that I've been using all throughout these 2 years that I've been creating AI art. But there's one fundamental difference that is that you have to really drop the ego, I guess. You just have to let it be because you can't control the outputs. You never know what you're going to get through mprops, which is something that I found completely fascinating about the platform. And it was really fun. I really enjoyed like letting go of these preconceived notions and what I thought I could take out of this prompt and just letting it be. And it's just raw, and it's something I like very, very much.
I love that. And you took one of the questions right out of my mouth in terms of kind of relinquishing control with a long form project. And I always think that's something artists, it takes some getting used to. Like I remember I asked a similar question to Danielle about her Muses project, Danielle King. And it was kind of a similar thing where like she was so used to being in control of everything before it like hit the blockchain and was there forever. And with M props, with FX hash, it's like you just gotta kind of let it go and let it be. And I think the surprises that come along the way are so fascinating.
Absolutely. It's all about acceptance, I guess. It's about understanding that you're not in control of this and you just accept whatever comes your way. And Myriad and all of these projects that people have been putting out through mprops is a little bit about that. And yeah, I was really happy with the outputs. I don't think there's a single output that I didn't like. All of them are all fascinating in their own way, and I added so many variations to the properties that I used for the prompt crafting, like the variables that they allow us to use, that and the way that they all worked well with one another. I was just really satisfied with that. I was really proud of myself.
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's such a cool project. I definitely need to explore all of the other outputs a little bit more just to kind of feel the full breadth of the project. But yeah, I thought this is super fascinating. And again, just the storytelling with your work is like you look at a piece and like you just start putting the pieces together and it just leads to a lot of questions. So I know we've got one last one here. I think it's a nice way to end it, similar to how we began with the Atlas Remastered series. So, the Monument in the Sky, this is called, which last time I don't think it had a name, which is exciting. What made you think, let me reinterpret this? Looks like this one is, I'm pretty sure this was a video. So this is a video file where the other one is a still file. Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
more about what made you revisit the Atlas series.
So the Atlas series remastered is for me mostly a celebration of this path that I've taken over the past 2 years of creating and letting go and expressing myself to thousands of people online. It's just really liberating to be an artist these days. And I wanted to use my Genesis collection as the canvas to celebrate this. And so, but yeah, Atlas actually does have, like the original Atlas pieces, they actually have names. Atlas 02 is called the Monument in the Sky as well. In the description of the
Got
piece,
it. Okay.
it says that.
Thank you
So
for
what I
correcting
did
me.
for, no, no problem, no problem. But what's interesting that for this piece, now that we have more advanced AI tools, I used the name of the original Atlas piece in the prompt with a strong weight, with a weight of 1.5. So the original name of the first Atlas piece is what moved the AI in this specific direction. And I chose to make it a video not because of anything animated, just because like lately I've been really experimenting with textures and stuff, and the difference between a static grain and an animated grain is astounding. Like if you look like the dithering and you can see the pixels shifting and stuff. It's just what I wanted to showcase with these, and it's just for me, it's a celebration and a rereading of my very first project and what brought me here in the first place. So it's very meaningful, and I'm still not done with Atlas Remastered. I have to get to work on the second half, but it's just been so fun seeing what how the AI reinterprets this 2 years later and seeing like the advancements firsthand between what was then and what is now. So for me, that's it's very meaningful, and I'm just really intrigued by how quickly these things evolve and how fascinating it is that we're getting better and better by the day. Not us, but these tools that we use. And I know that better is relative, but how these things advance and how crazy it is that we have on our disposal these tools that create images out of words, and it's just it's a culmination of what it means to be an AI artist, like advancements in technology and all of that that brought us here in the first place. So this is a celebration of that.
I love that. And yeah, I mean, just the speed of technology right now is just absolutely fascinating. And like, I know like back when we were younger, it's like, oh, the future, there's going to be flying cars and this and that. But it's like, this is the type of stuff where it's like, we're living in the future. It's like when you go to Chat GPT and it can spit something out that would normally take somebody hours to write up. It's like this is just it's magic. Like it's a magical experience. And I think for artists, having a brand new tool set where you can be as creative or you can go in any direction you want, it's like I know it's overwhelming, but it's also so empowering where it's if you have an idea,
Absolutely.
if you have a feeling, you can take wherever you want. It's like you're not limited by the tool in a sense anymore. It's just you're limited by your own creativity. And I think that's a pretty I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't know if that's a bad thing. I think it's just a very interesting place to be. And as artists continue to explore kind of like what it means to be a human in this AI centric world that we're accelerating towards, there's just a lot to really talk about and a lot to explore. And I think art is a great way to kind of have that commentary on how technology is evolving and how society is going to change as a result.
100%. I agree 100%. No, thank you so much for this. It was very
This
meaningful
was
to
this was so
put
much
these words
fun.
out there. Yeah, it was really fun.
Amazing. Well, yeah, thank you again for telling us all about your work. This was so fascinating. I'm very, very excited to listen back to this because I'm sure there's some things that I missed that I'm sure I'll really appreciate later. So, big thank you to you. Big thank you to everyone else here in the space and in the gallery that took the time to walk and talk with us. Truly appreciate it. And again, we will have this up on YouTube hopefully in the next few days or so. For those that weren't here, we could send them out that link so they can check it out. And this gallery will be here as well for the foreseeable future. So until next time, everybody, we'll catch you on the internet. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.